The Toyota Corolla is not exactly known for its driving dynamics, but that wasn't always the case. Back in the late 1980s, Toyota made a sporty version of the Corolla known as the AE86, and its recipe was pretty simple. Toyota started with a lightweight hatchback, added a dual overhead cam motor at the front, a manual transmission in the middle, and a drive axle at the rear. Fast forward 30 years and Toyota chefs are back in the kitchen trying to replicate the winning recipe of the AE86, and this is what they've come up with: the 2019 Toyota Corolla Hatchback. And today, we're gonna see if it's any good. Right off the bat, we should mention that Toyota's tweaked its sporty hatchback recipe over the years. Whereas the AE86 was rear-wheel drive, this new Corolla hatchback is front-wheel drive. But you still get a peppy dual overhead cam engine at the front and a manual transmission in the middle, although you can also get a CVT. You also notice that the Corolla hatchback is 5 doors where the AE86 was a 3-door. But this still has some of the sporty spirit of the AE86, so let's carry on. A big part of being sporty is looking sporty. So let's cover some of the Corolla hatchback's exterior styling. You notice up front it's kind of got these thin headlights, and that's because they're LED. That's standard on all trim levels. It also has this triple J-shaped LEDs that gives it a distinct look for its daytime running lights, and they're also active at night. And there's also this kind of oversized grille that Toyota's doing now, and a pretty aggressive front splitter. And on upper end models like this XSE here, you get LED fog lights. And that sportiness also carries over into the Corolla hatchback's side view. It's got these 18-inch wheels with black pockets on them. It's got these aggressive side sills, a really sharply raked rear hatch, and this is an optional spoiler that kind of makes it feel like a mini Focus RS. And Toyota is most excited about the Corolla hatchback's rear styling, specifically its hatch. That's because in order to get this bulge here and these creases, Toyota had to develop a new kind of plastic technology to make this shape production feasible. I'm not sure if it was worth it, but here it is, and it kind of makes the hatchback at least look distinct. Before we get to the Corolla hatchback's interior, I thought we'd cover what's under hood. Now this is a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, and the most remarkable thing about it is it doesn't have a plastic engine cover. Honestly, it's pretty boring under here. 168 horsepower, 151 pound-feet of torque, which is more than the outgoing Corolla IM. But in a world where turbocharged 4 cylinders are making a gazillion horsepower, it's kind of a letdown. I really wish Toyota would have put a lot more pep under here. So here we are in the interior of the Corolla hatchback, and I must say, it's pretty nice in here. This is just the entry-level SE model, and even though it's the base version of the hatchback, it's still really nice. It's got a soft-touch dash with some stitching on it. The climate control's got these metal-look buttons and these kind of premium-feeling knobs. You get a standard 7-inch touchscreen infotainment system that runs Apple CarPlay, and another color LCD screen in the gauge cluster. It just feels premium for an entry-level model. There's also an XSE you can upgrade to, and it gets leather seats, a power driver's seat. It actually gets a full LCD gauge cluster, and you can get an optional JBL sound system with navigation, some things like that. But even the SE is surprisingly well equipped. All right, so here we go in the Corolla hatchback. I'm in the SE model with the CVT. Like I said, there's also an XSE, and you can get a 6-speed manual. I actually drove that car earlier today. I'll talk about that a little bit as I go here, but we're in this car, so let's focus on this for now. The first thing to note about this car is, even though it's got a CVT, Toyota's re-engineered this, so it actually has a physical gear now for accelerator. So I'm at a stop, and I'm gonna go, and it kind of just feels like a regular automatic. People don't really like the rubber band feeling that a CVT has off the line. It's kind of, with this actual physical gear, Toyota's mostly eliminated that. And actually, it makes it pretty good. It's one of the better CVTs I've driven because of that. Once you get going though, it still feels like a CVT, which is less than ideal. But when you put it in sport mode, it simulates a 10-speed auto. And you also have these paddle shifters, so you kind of like fake it, but it's still a CVT at the end of the day. So earlier today, I got to drive the 6-speed manual version of this car. With smaller engines like this with not a lot of power, I tend to prefer a manual just because you can really wring out what power you do have. It's got an intelligent mode that does rev matching downshifts, and it also smooths out between shifts. Like when you're going from first to second, it has some wizardry where it makes it smoother. And that was a pretty nice feature. It worked well. Most people are probably going to opt for the CVT, but the 6-speed manual is pretty good, and it gives this car a little bit more fun. I mean, it's not going to be a Canyon Carver no matter what form you get it in, but the 6-speed's fine, and the CVT with this actual gear is pretty good too. The suspension is pretty good. It's It's stiffer than you'd get in like a Corolla sedan. It feels sportier than that, but it still does a good job at soaking up the bumps. You still get some lean through the corners, but it's not horrible. Again, it's not a sports hatchback, but it's kind of better than a Corolla sedan, so take that for what it is. So this is a 2-liter naturally aspirated, not turbocharged like most of the modern stuff. And you can tell, I mean, I put my foot down, makes a lot of noise, but it doesn't, you're not really going fast. It's kind of more bark than bite. I really wish they would have put a turbo under this. Even with 200 horsepower, a little bit over, it would have really changed the character of this car. Toyota's also developed this software to prevent understeer. It kind of detects the G-rate and then can use the brakes to mitigate understeer. But to be honest, I don't think there's enough power here and confidence in the suspension to really need that system. I don't find myself pushing this thing to the point of it understeering. Toyota is really pushing this Corolla hatchback as kind of a sporty driver's car. But after spending some time behind the wheel, I don't think that's the case. The steering in this isn't very good. Certainly not up to hot hatchback standards. It's really light, it's really vague, and the on-center feel is pretty bad. You kind of got this, you can move the wheel a little bit and nothing really happens. I think Toyota's got a little crazy on these seats too. They've put these aggressive bolsters on them because they really want to sell this as a sporty hatchback. But I mean, it's not a sporty hatchback, so these are just kind of overkill, you know? It's like kind of putting track shoes on your grandma. It would have been better if they just made these for more comfort with a little bit of sport. And it's hard to get a good seating angle. I feel like I'm sitting kind of low. I can never really get this backrest in the right position. It's not as comfortable as I wanted it to be. Suspension is comfortable enough, but the seat itself could be more comfortable. I mean, it sounds fast, so that's gotta be more something. Now, another thing worth noting is that this is a really well-equipped car. I've already talked about the infotainment, the nice materials, but it's also got a lot of high-tech safety stuff. This has standard adaptive cruise control, lane departure warning. It just comes really well-equipped for such an entry-level car. Toyota actually hasn't told us the pricing yet. We expect this to be about the same as the Corolla IM. You're probably gonna get into this around 20 grand. To have all those features at that price point, it's pretty impressive. One thing to note is blind spot monitoring is optional. And you can't get it at all on the manual. Toyota really, I don't know why they did that, but that's the way they did it. The Toyota hasn't announced fuel economy ratings for this yet, but this does come with a fuelometer here in the gauge cluster, and it says it's been averaging 24.5 miles per gallon. And that may not sound good, but keep in mind, this car's been driven by journalists all day who have been just absolutely flogging it. So 24.5, I assume it's probably going to be closer to 30 when it comes out, which isn't bad. That's pretty good for mixed driving. So there you have it, the 2019 Corolla hatchback, living proof that the apple can fall far from the tree. I was really hoping this was going to be the modern reincarnation of the AE86, but it's just not. It's not that sporty to drive. But this wasn't a completely wasted effort on Toyota's part, far from it. In making the Corolla hatchback, Toyota's actually made a better Corolla sedan. I think this is better looking than a Corolla sedan. I think it drives better than the Corolla sedan. And it's a hatchback, so it's more practical than a Corolla sedan. Toyota's really trying to come up with a recipe for a modern AE86, but instead they accidentally stumbled upon a recipe for a better Corolla. And that's not all bad.